From climate change to conflict, food systems are facing big challenges. Can artificial intelligence help solve them? In this edition of the CNBC debate, we examine the headwinds confronting farming and rural communities and where technology and AI can support all aspects of agriculture and, in turn, strengthen global food security. Here in Milan, Italy, host city of the Asian Development Bank, otherwise known as the ADB's 58th Annual Board of Governors meeting, which is home to Central Europe for the first time in almost a decade, CNBC welcomed a panel of experts to discuss these pressing issues and opportunities. I'm Silvia Amaro, and joining me on stage was ADB's Yasmin Siddiqui.
I am a director, so managing projects, investments, lending by the Asian Development Bank, which is a multilateral development bank with 69 member countries covering the region.
Syngenta Group CEO Jeff Rowe.
Syngenta Group is the largest ag tech input provider in the world. Our mission, our purpose is really to help farmers produce more and have less of an impact on the environment.
Erie's Yvonne Pinto.
I'm the Director General of the International Rice Research Institute. We work in 17 countries, predominantly South Asia, Southeast Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. And we really help smallholder farmers to create solutions to resolve many of the challenges that they face, from production to markets to sustainability.
And Donald Brown of UN agency IFAD.
I'm the Associate Vice President for Programs in the International Fund for Agricultural Development. We finance agriculture and rural development. We're in over 100 countries. We have over 200 projects. We have an investment portfolio of about 20 billion at the moment, but we very much focus on poor rural communities and small farmers.
I would like to first paint a picture for our audience about some of the challenges that we are all facing. And I would like to start with you, if I can, and just, I know that you've talked about a food crisis impacting the APAC region in particular. Could you give us a little bit more color of what is going on at this stage?
Sure, Sylvia. So we have a region with half the world's food insecure people, roughly 400 million people who are undernourished. We also have a region which is facing, much like the rest of the world, some of those challenges that we're all seeing now from an economic context and uncertainty on the path forward. But perhaps what I would like to stress is a region which really is at high risk of climate and disaster impacts. And for many of us who hail from that part of Asia, the Philippines often called Typhoon Alley during October and November, where we will often see typhoons just zipping through and can result in the total loss of crops that farmers have worked hard to cultivate. So it's a combination. In some parts of our region, we're also seeing conflict and the impacts of conflict, particularly on women and girls, who are always the most impacted by economic downturn, climate and disaster, and of course, conflicts.
There's a plethora of problems that you just highlighted there. I'll come to you, Jeff, and try to understand, from your point of view, from the corporate world, really, what would you highlight as being the biggest challenge at this stage?
We bring innovation to farmers all over the world. And we make massive investment, about $1.5 billion US dollars a year on R&D. And it takes us a tremendously long period of time to get approvals to be able to bring that innovation to farmers. And so as climate change and some of the challenges affecting agriculture get more intense, innovation is needed faster, but it's taking longer. And it's not because the innovation cycle is longer, but what is taking longer is, in fact, even harder to predict, is the regulatory approval. And so that's essentially the last mile. And I want to be really clear on one thing. Myself, my company, my industry wants a very robust regulatory system. It's very important that society respects the regulatory approval process. But it's taking far too long, and in some cases is a bit of a trade barrier type of situation. And that is putting farmers at risk. It's putting food security at risk. And I think it needs to be addressed.
Ivan, let me come to you and address from your point of view, and of course you follow what's happening, particularly when it comes to rice. Highlight to us what is the biggest issue, if you can pinpoint one.
It's really important to understand that rice feeds roughly 50% of the world's population. The relationship with rice is very cultural. It's not going away. And therefore, rice production is critical for a large number of people, 350 million smallholder farmers. They produce roughly between 70 and 80% of our food. But one of the challenges that we have in rice particularly is that rice is dependent upon the judicious use of natural resources, and water is becoming scarcer, and rice in flooded systems produces large amounts of methane. Methane is a greenhouse gas, it contributes to climate change, and so there is an interrelationship that we face through smallholder farmers' efforts with food systems, with health, with climate, and with aspects related to mitigating the effect of that climate. The temperature is rising and we have opportunities that is a very narrow genetic gain in crops like rice to be able to perform under those climatic conditions. And therefore research and development and getting solutions to farmers is critical in that mix.
Donald, I know that you do a lot of work with rural communities. Walk us through what are some of their biggest challenges.
Much of the world's food is produced by small farmers. We all think, particularly in places like Europe, of the large farmers, but even in Europe, they're small farmers. In some continents, it's nearly 70% of the world's food, in others 30%. These small farmers are the most affected by climate change and the least able to cope with it. So you've got a phenomenon where you've got increasing extreme poverty in rural areas. Much of the world's food comes from rural areas. Climate change is real and here, and yet the people producing much of that food are not able to build their resilience to continue to produce. So that's where we try and fit in. How do you ensure that, one, we can secure global food supplies? We saw in COVID that actually the breakdown of global food systems meant that we relied on local food systems produced by small farmers. So how do you secure that? How do you ensure that they are able to adapt to climate change and at the same time participate within a country's development, not be left behind it? And that's where we fit in.
So let's try to understand to what extent AI is perhaps already being used to address challenges. So I'll come back to you, Donald. What sort of benefits, if any, really, would you say AI poses?
AI is a frontier technology, and I think we can't get too carried away claiming too much at this point in time. The first thing we've been doing is trying to develop very large data sets, because we've got nearly 50 years worth of learning from countries in EFAD. One of the great things about EFAD is we often have similar projects, but in very different contexts, and there's no one solution fits all. So by using AI, we can really start mining that sort of data and really looking at improving project design, project impact, project interventions.
Let me come back to you, Ivan, and also explain to us to what extent you're already seeing AI being used and what is the potential in this space.
So I think at a research agency like ours, we've obviously collected a lot of data on experiments. We have always looked at structured data sets and patterns that are emerging. But actually, the advent of generative AI now enables us to combine unstructured data sets that look at climate at a landscape level, or look at satellite imagery and weather forecasting with the performance of genetic material. And so we really have an opportunity ahead of us to use research to understand how these can be developed into tools and enterprises and opportunities, both to inform us and guide things like scenario planning, but also to actually provide tangible, practical, pragmatic solutions to farmers, and we're excited about those.
What other solutions would you highlight?
We house the largest rice gene bank in the world. It took us 52 years to get a submergent tolerant gene into varieties in 6 countries: India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Cambodia and Vietnam and the Philippines. And it took us that length of time to screen about 18,000 genetic accessions to find that gene. And we can now do it using machine learning and AI that is trained on all the genetic accessions in the gene bank. And it takes us 18 months to screen 60,000 accessions. And we have been able to get that material into varieties, into those countries, in a matter of 2 or 3 years. And the process by which we do the testing has been 10 times faster and 16 times cheaper than we would have done it conventionally. So that's the power of this opportunity.
Jeff, what about when it comes to some of the work that Syngenta is doing in this space? And perhaps you can explain to us what you're also working on when it comes to using AI in that context.
In our plant breeding organization, we're using machine learning, artificial intelligence to make much better combinations. We're able to predict in a much more efficient way genetic combinations that previously you would have had to plan out options, walk out in the field, observe them. It would take months, if not years. We're able to now predict this in a much more effective way so that we can get new hybrids to the market, new varieties to the market much faster. Also, we're able to select for things like drought tolerance that allow farmers in certain parts of the world to have confidence that those products are going to perform with extreme weather conditions.
I would like to look forward as well. And could you tell us a little bit more of where we can go next with this technology? You've highlighted how you're using it, but where do we go from here?
Things like efficiency of R&D, cutting a third of the time out, logistics. We have a global supply chain. There's a lot of cost and efficiency that can be done there. We talk about enabling of precision agriculture. We look in soil science, soil health, which is a very exciting area. But the one I'm probably most excited about because of my heritage coming from a farm is the ability to use AI to connect in a more efficient and effective way with farmers. And what artificial intelligence allows us to do is to be able to help those farmers make better decisions. And I also really like the fact that it's not size dependent. These decisions can help the smallest farmers in the world, and they can help the biggest farmers in the world.
Jeff, perhaps you've already highlighted a little bit some of the work that Syngenta is doing in this space, but how are you making your work and your technology developments accessible outside your company?
A lot of it is about the access to the network of information, the infrastructure that exists. And in some cases, there's just not a lot we can do about that. But we have been training our employees in certain parts of the world to be able to use technology to be able to scale their impact. It used to be that if an agronomist wanted to get information to a farmer, they had to hold a meeting or they had to send out mailing. Now they can push these messages out, general messages out to growers, or using artificial intelligence and modeling, they can actually send specific messages to growers. And I'll give you a specific example. As I mentioned, I'm from a farm, and earlier today I got a message that said on the farm, it gave me a stand count from planting that had happened a couple weeks ago, and it gave me an estimate of the weed risk in this particular field. So this is a drone that flew the field, did all that information and sent it to me. This farm is in Illinois, and we're sitting here in Milan, and I'm getting an updated view of, is there a decision to be made on this field? And I think that's fantastic. And it's going to have, it has had and will continue to have a big impact on agriculture. But I want to bridge to a second topic, which is I really think attracting bright young people to agriculture is a real urgent thing.
Yeah.
And I do think that this innovation, this technology that I'm referencing and other panelists have referenced, is an avenue to attract new talent back in agriculture, because the agriculture that happens today is dramatically different than the agriculture that my grandfather did on our family farm. And I think that not only creates opportunities for people like me who have a farming background, but I think even more exciting, more interesting, is it attracts people that have no connection to agriculture, but maybe they're digital experts and they're looking for difficult problems to solve and a purpose that they believe in.
So that brings me to my next question, Yasmin, which is exactly that. Is actually AI an entry point, giving an entry point for more young people to get excited and attracted by work in the agricultural world?
We know with feminization of agriculture, we've got to be inclusive and think about the women who form a large majority of farming societies in our countries. Farmers are women as well, and they may not all be literate. They may not all have access to mobile phones, because we know in many countries, women may have less ownership of mobile phones compared to male farmers. So that's fundamental. Coming to your point on young people and entering into these areas of AI, and can we incentivize it? Well, the hope is there, of course, and last year we did a great competition together with partners such as IFAD and the World Bank called Moonshots for Development, which was actually for AI in rural development, and that was an open competition. And we had hundreds of thousands of entries, and these were all young entrepreneurs, many of them with their startups, looking to solve these complex challenges. And I remember being on the panel with all of the runners-up, and they must have been a quarter of my age. They were all these great youngsters. So for me, yes, they're out there. It's about how do we incentivize them in many of the countries that we're working in, where it still may not be the best environment to be in. But I believe that with, as ADB works across in education, tertiary education as well, incentivizing this through tertiary education scholarships. We've seen it in other countries, attracting women into science and engineering, scholarships and doing incentives, get the young people into these areas and see how we can really find those solutions. I guess similar to what you're saying, Jeff, get those solutions for our farmers, all of them.
I have to break up the issue of costs here. Donald, perhaps, do you have any information of how much investment has been done in this space? And perhaps even more importantly, how much more do we need to make sure that we have a sustainable global food supply chain?
We in IFAD call it the first mile. That's where development begins. And if they don't have access to mobile networks, if they don't have roads, if they don't have many of the educational opportunities there, in some ways that's the bigger investment, the investment in the AI. The easier bit is the investment in the AI. So for us, it's ensuring that the infrastructure is in place to be able to then utilize the investments in AI rather than just talk about the investments in the AI upfront on the cost basis. I think the investments are far more modest on the AI side than the infrastructure investments needed.
Can you share any numbers with us?
So I think there are multiple points here that are worth considering. If we talk about opportunities for youth, then things like data and digital and AI offer huge opportunities for them. If we look at the growth in that market between the years of 2014 and 2023, we're looking at roughly somewhere in the region of 23 to 24%. When we look at investment from the private sector, we're looking at the growth of the AI industry. And I think in Africa, it ranges from something like 10 million to 600 million in the space of less than 10 years. So I think the secret is to combine our strengths. We're a research agency who can look at the biology, but we're working with organizations that are private sector. We're also working with organizations that are working with government, and we're working with governments too. So how do we make the sum of the parts count? I talked a little bit about submergence tolerance. If we consider that something like 16 million hectares of land was under flooding in 2024, and the potential for the use of sort of submergent tolerant varieties is 49 million hectares in Asia and Africa. If we're able to do that, that's a $27 billion return on investment. And that is staggering. But I think focus is a key word and collaboration is a key word. No one organization can do this by themselves. It has to be a collaborative effort, and the problem has to be defined clearly enough to enable the sum of the parts to address it. So those are some of the figures that I find staggering, but motivating in order to continue to try and attract young people into this arena so they can actually have a purpose-driven future.
Yasmin, perhaps give us a little bit more indication in terms of, ADB investments and research around AI, what sort of level of investments are we talking about here?
So just as an example, last year our lending was about $26 billion in total, covering a lot of sectors, all the way from energy to health to education to water and agriculture. So I would say for ADB, we have a large opportunity. We also can mobilize now going forward additional $10 billion a year. So for me, it's not so much about, maybe coming from ADB, it's not often the dollars I'm thinking about, because that we take for granted. It's more about creating the enabling environment. And I believe, Jeff, you mentioned this about the regulatory environment. And I believe this is where we can make the difference, because in our engagement with governments and in leveraging our financing, we have the opportunity to influence governments to create those enabling environments, which will then open the doors to the private sector, to research entities. So it's that catalytic effect that we play and role that we play in mobilizing financing and really trying to bring in the private sector. And looking forward, we're aiming to really build up the numbers on our private sector, particularly in our agriculture sector. And the 40 billion announcement, we're looking at about 11 billion of that coming in from the private sector. So large numbers for us and tremendous opportunities. And it's really about that partnership on where we play a role, where private sector plays a role, and research.
I just would like to ask from all of you a concluding thought after our conversation.
Thank you. I mean, really, smallholder farmers produce 80% of our food. We have to invest in them. We have to use modern technologies to deal with the incredible strength of climate change and how it's affecting these farmers. We don't just want to produce innovations that are going to move the needle on food system security, but it has to be health, and it has to be planetary health as well. Borrowing from Jeff's points, how do we understand the soil? Because without water and soil, there is no agriculture. How do we understand it so we can leverage it?
For me, the opportunities of AI are enormous for small farmers. By actually using AI, by then combining that with the use of modern technologies, they can get, as I say, localized information, specific information that they never saw before. And that could really revolutionize the way that they make decisions and the way they invest.
Talking about a new revolution. Jeff, a good building thought.
In China, we have what we call modern ag platform, map centers, designed to be able to help farmers farm in a better way, a more sustainable way. They're overutilizing fertilizer, that they have degraded land. So this is about creating an extension. And I think AI fits on top of that perfectly. But the reality is that the farmers in this part of the world have half the yield that they should. And we have the tools, the technology to improve the yield and improve their sustainability. And it just hasn't happened. And so we have a part to play in that. We want to partner with whomever to be able to help these farmers who need the help.
Given that everyone has described the potential out there, it's about how do we really get that down into the ground level, and how do we ensure that our governments are on board with us as well to drive this? Because at the end of the day, it's them who own it. They're the clients, they're the stakeholders. We are the enablers, but ownership has to be there.
And everyone needs to work together. Thank you so much to all of you for joining the CNBC debate. And please join me in a round of applause to our panelists.